Hi everyone, we've got a lovely dramatic sky today that we're going to have a go at. Colours wise, there's very little drawing. I've got a horizon line here and a rough idea of where these trees are at the bottom, and then what I've done is where these lighter areas are, because I'm going to leave a few sharp lines, I've just drawn very lightly where they are on the sky. Colours wise, the first one I've got is Naples yellow. If you haven't got Naples yellow, raw sienna will do the job nicely. Then a little bit of rose, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, intense blue, a grey with cobalt blue and burnt sienna, and indigo. Now all of these I've squirted neat onto the palette, so I haven't put any water into them. I'm going to work like that today, so it's a slightly different technique. Okay, so I'm going to get some water on now, and I'm trying to avoid those areas that I've penciled out. So you want plenty of water, gives you plenty of time. Doesn't matter if you get slightly different shapes. It's better for it to be a rough shape than to come on and create something that you've come around really too neatly. So those little dry areas, just come around them neatly. Not neatly, roughly, sorry. So you've just got a shape there, and then you can work with it. Plenty of water on. Make sure your brush is nice and clean to start with. So I've got my round number 10 that I'm going to use for the sky. I've dipped in to neat Naples yellow. I'm going to bring that in. Brush a little bit of a rinse. Just be really careful when you're picking up the permanent rose that you don't pick up too much. So I've got the tiniest like pin prick on the bottom of the brush. Then cerulean blue. There's only little hints of this cerulean blue at the bottom. Then cobalt blue, and the cobalt blue's coming in to this area. There's quite a lot of different blues in this sky. So just let the water spread it around. Maybe you got this hard edge, which is something we don't have very often in a picture, especially in a sky, but it works quite nicely in this one. Those couple of bits of hard edges. So this is still cobalt blue. And then into the intense blue. what's really nice is when you're coming on with neat colour is you're getting that powerful impact of the colour, and this is quite a dramatic sky, so it's nice that that's picking that up. Come into this cobalt blue area as well. Okay, rinse my brush, and then I'm going to come into my grey and give my grey a little bit of a stir. So this now you're looking at is the most of the cloud, so this grey. I'm going to come through this grey, and then I'm going to come on darker with the indigo after. So you've got some quite dark, dramatic clouds. Remember, circular motion for your cloud. Bring some through your other colours. You don't want to end up with too many sort of stripes, so you've got to make sure that you're bringing through. And remember, you don't want it dark everywhere, so on some parts when you come on, make it a little bit lighter. Don't eliminate all of this colour at the bottom either. You need that there to lift it a little bit. So now you should have some softer areas, some harder areas. Give your brush a really good rinse, then wet it and just dab it off, and then what I want you to do is just touch in a little bit where you've got this hard area. So not all of it is hard. It's really important that it's a bit soft, a bit hard. Make sure you're dabbing a little bit of water off the brush. You don't want to create a huge watermark on the picture. That works so much better. Okay, and then the last one I'm going to dip into indigo. I'm going to drop down to a number 6. And what you're looking at now is those really dark areas. It's important you move fairly quickly now, because this is going to dry fairly quickly. But the number 6 will mean that it doesn't spread too far. The fact that it's thick will mean it doesn't spread too far. And you can come in and just get these really dramatic bits working now, which is the real dark bits. Sweeping along. You want to do a combination of a few dabs and a few strokes, circular motion, so you get that really nice cloud effect. And then I'm going to come in a little bit here. So it's an artistic license. Doesn't have to be exactly the same. What you want is to hit a few places. 3 places, it always holds something together nicely. And then you want to let this dry naturally, if you can, because the indigo does tend to fade with the hairdryer. And take a little bit in there. Okay, I'm really pleased with that. Take a little bit. If at any point it starts to dry, then I would just stop with these darker colours. You've got a finite window and you've got to use it really quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to let that dry naturally. Okay, so while that's still drying off, I don't want to blow dry because it will fade ever such a lot. What I've got here is sap green, again neat on the palette, and I've got a mix of intense blue or phthalo blue or Winsor blue red shade with burnt sienna, so I've got really dark greens. So I've got two greens there. What I'm going to do is just come on this bottom section. So I'm not bringing it right the way up to the horizon line, the water. I'm just getting the bottom section at this point. And then I'm going to dip into my sap green, bring it along. You see the very bottom of the picture, there's a bit of grass, so I'm just getting that area to start with. And then there's some shrubs to the left of it that are more in the foreground, so I'm just going to start to build a base on those. Again with the sap green. And then I'm going to come into this darker green. And just start to define a little bit of these shrubs. Really what I'm working in is the areas behind the shrubs and the darker bits, so I'm looking for those just to start to help define and lift them out. I'm going to come over these in a bit. With a picture like this, you want it to be really simple in the foreground, really, so that the sky is the focal point. And then I'm just dipping back into the sap green, but I haven't rinsed my brush. And I'm just going to bring some of this to the top here. What I'm doing really is just giving a base. I obviously don't want to touch my sky yet, but the more colour that I've got in here, the easier my job will be when I come to pop the trees in. So it really is just a base. I'm just going to bring a bit of water just so I don't end up with a hard edge, just to fade that out at the horizon line. So it should be quite bright at the bottom. This is just a mix of the sap green and some of the green that was on my brush still, just at the top, just to start to give a little bit of a base. Come back into the dark green. Take a little bit more in here. just to help define those again. Okay, I'll dry that one off. So I've got a combination now of 3 brushes and this dark green. So I've got my number 6, a small flat and a wet round number 10. And I'm going to work from one side to the other. So I'm going to start with this big tree here. At any point you can break, because these are sharper trees, so you're not having to do it wet in wet, we're going on dry. So I've come down now into my flat, and I'm using that to create that base. And then where I've got those nice soft lines with darker earlier, I can use those now to start to create the edge of that shrub here. And then I'm going to work my way along. So some little bits. Random is good. So don't try to do everything. Just pick out a few areas. Don't be afraid to change the direction of the brush. So I'm changing this here. And some of them will come across one another. So don't try to do every little individual tree. With a damp brush at any point you can just soften in a section. So I'm just dabbing in just to get a little bit of variety. Let's dip into a little bit more colour. So you just want it to look like a row of trees. Take a little bit more water in there. Without too much effort. Carry on down. So I'm using these darker areas to help pull out these shrubs. At the front, you can use the brush on the side a little bit to create some dry brushed areas. You could just hold the brush like this. And come along. And then I'm going to put in a big tree. In here. It sounds like Penny's having a meltdown. Go and check her for a second. So you've got these little shrubbery bits. You can see these shrubs at the front have come out now. Okay, I'm going to continue along here. Okay, so I'm working my way along. So I want to show you what I'm doing when I get to the grass area. So I'm still using that mix of dark green. I'm using both brushes. Just trying to create a variety of tree marks, really. So if you, when you're using your small flat, if you just change the direction you're using it in, that's usually quite good. To create some different shrubbery in here. So we'll have a few more conifer trees here. This is when the tripod's in the way. So I'm just using that horizontal stroke just to break through these. And you can come in with a little bit with your number 6. If you end up with a different colour at any point, that will still work as well. I'm mixing up as I go along, so the colour's changing a little bit every now and then. And at the bottom, I want you to make sure you're getting a nice dark edge, and then with a wet brush you're just going to come along the grass bit again, so it's just going to nicely soften that in. You can see that flowing. So I've got a couple more to do down here. You can always swap to a line writer or a rigger if you want some finer bits. It's really good for you to practice doing your trees, but also doing random. This is random. If you don't get it random, you'll end up with a pattern and it won't work as well. And again, wet brush along that bottom. Okay, I'm going to dry that off and then come on to the front shrubs again. Okay, I've just finished the picture and realised that the last bit it hasn't recorded, so I'm just going to explain what I've done down here. So I've got an oil painting brush or a harder bristled brush, and I've used some sap green neat, and I've dabbed on here to create a stippled effect at the bottom, and then a bit of the darker green in between, so you've got a little bit more detail there. Then the indigo, I've used my line writer brush, and with some indigo I've just come in and created some darker tree trunks just in places along here. Okay, hopefully this bit's recorded this time. Okay, I'll see you next week.